Imagine a man who spends his days mopping floors, ignored by most who walk past him. To many, he's just a janitor, invisible in the background. But one afternoon, inside a quiet gym, everything changed. A young martial arts champion decided to have fun by challenging this older black janitor to a sparring match. What happened next left the entire room frozen in disbelief. This wasn't just about fighting skills. It was about respect, dignity, and a hidden truth no one could have imagined. Stay with this story, because the lesson buried inside will stay with you long after it ends. James worked as a janitor in a local gym, the kind of place where young athletes trained hard, dreaming of trophies and recognition. Every morning, he arrived before anyone else, sweeping, scrubbing, and making sure everything was spotless. To most people, he was just the janitor, someone they barely noticed. His quiet presence blended into the background, and that suited him just fine. But behind his calm eyes and tired smile, James carried a past that no one around him knew. Years ago, before life had worn him down, he had been more than just a worker with a mop. He had been an athlete himself, a disciplined fighter, strong and respected. But life had changed course, leaving him with heartbreak, guilt, and a need to disappear from the spotlight. The gym for James wasn't just a place of work. It was a reminder of who he used to be. He would pause sometimes, watching the younger men practice kicks, strikes, and holds. Their energy made him nostalgic, but also a little sad. He knew what real discipline looked like, what true training demanded, and he could see the difference between arrogance and genuine strength. One young man in particular caught his eye. Derek, a rising martial arts champion, was known for his confidence, but also for his pride. He strutted around the gym, loud and bold, never missing a chance to show off. For Derek, fighting wasn't about respect. It was about dominance, about proving he was untouchable. And to him, James was nothing but a janitor, someone beneath notice. James never complained, never confronted anyone. He stayed in his corner, working silently, carrying his story inside. But little did anyone know, a single moment was coming that would bring his hidden past colliding with his present, in a way that no one in that gym would ever forget. Derek's reputation in the gym grew quickly. He was talented, no doubt, but his pride grew faster than his skills. He mocked new trainees, belittled anyone who struggled, and often bragged about being unbeatable. His words carried the sharpness of arrogance, but what made them sting most was when he singled out James. Whenever James swept near the mats, Derek would laugh loud enough for everyone to hear. "Careful, old man," he'd say, smirking. "Don't slip with that mop. These mats are for fighters, not janitors." Others chuckled awkwardly, not because they agreed, but because no one wanted to be Derek's next target. James never responded. He kept working, quiet and steady, never meeting Derek's eyes. He had faced worse in life, worse insults, harsher judgments. And he had learned that silence was sometimes stronger than words. Still, the sting was there, especially when Derek's remarks carried an unspoken tone. "You're less. You're nothing." One afternoon, Derek had just finished an intense sparring session. Sweat dripped down his face, his chest rose and fell heavily, but his confidence never dimmed. He looked over at James, who was wiping down equipment in the corner, minding his own business. That's when Derek smirked, his ego hungry for another show. "Hey, janitor," he called out, loud enough for the entire gym to hear. "Why don't you spar with me? Just for fun. Don't worry. I'll go easy on you." The room went quiet. Some of the younger fighters exchanged nervous glances. They knew this wasn't about fun. This was Derek's way of humiliating the man who already lived in the shadows. To him, it was entertainment, a chance to make others laugh at James's expense. James paused, his cloth still in his hand. For a moment, he didn't move, as if weighing whether to ignore it. He had spent years avoiding conflict, years walking, away from challenges that carried no purpose. But Derek's tone wasn't just teasing. It was rooted in something deeper, a kind of dismissal, the same kind James had faced too many times in his life. Being judged not for his abilities, but for his skin, his job, and the assumptions others made about his worth. The gym waited. Everyone's eyes shifted between Derek, puffed up with pride, and James, calm and unreadable. Finally, James set the cloth aside and slowly walked toward the mat. His movements were steady, controlled, almost deliberate. He didn't rush, didn't speak. But there was something in the way he carried himself that made even the air feel heavier. Derek grinned wide, mistaking James's silence for fear. "This'll be quick," he boasted, bouncing lightly on his feet as he prepared. "Don't worry, folks, I won't hurt him too bad." But as James stepped onto the mat, those who paid close attention noticed something strange. His posture wasn't that of a beginner. His shoulders were relaxed, his stance balanced, his eyes sharp. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed the faces of a few onlookers. Something about the janitor didn't feel ordinary anymore. And though James hadn't thrown a single punch, the atmosphere of the gym had already shifted. The quiet man with the mop was no longer invisible. The crowd circled closer, curious to see how quickly Derek would end the so-called match. He bounced lightly on his toes, grinning as if he were about to put on a comedy show rather than a sparring session. James, however, stood still. His hands rested loosely at his sides, his eyes calm, steady, the eyes of a man who had already seen more battles than Derek could imagine. The trainer gave a hesitant nod, and Derek lunged first. His strike was fast, sharp, and filled with the energy of youth. But in an instant, James shifted, a subtle step, a precise angle, and Derek's fist cut through empty air. The room gasped. James hadn't struck back. He had simply moved with a grace that didn't belong to a janitor. Derek frowned, brushing it off, and tried again, faster this time, mixing kicks with punches. But each attempt ended the same way. James slipping, turning, deflecting without effort. He wasn't even breathing heavily. His movements were controlled, almost effortless, as if he were reading Derek's body like an open book. Whispers began, spreading through the gym. "Did you see that? How did he move like that?" The laughter that Derek had hoped for never came. Instead, the room was filled with awe, the sound of realization settling in. Finally, James made a move of his own. With one swift, fluid motion, he redirected Derek's punch and gently swept his legs out from under him. Derek landed hard on the mat, stunned, his pride bruised more than his body. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. James stepped back, offering no taunt, no smile of victory. He didn't need to. His control, his skill, his quiet dominance had said everything. The room that once looked down on him now stood speechless. James didn't raise his hands in triumph or throw Derek's insults back at him. Instead, he quietly helped Derek back to his feet. That single gesture spoke louder than any words could. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about dignity. For the first time, Derek looked into James's eyes and saw something he had never expected. Strength built not just from skill, but from discipline, patience, and years of experience. This wasn't a man to be mocked. This was a man to be respected. The whispers grew into quiet conversations as the truth spread across the gym. Some remembered old rumors that James had once been a fighter. Others simply stared, realizing they had judged a man by his uniform and skin before ever knowing who he truly was. James walked off the mat the same way he had stepped onto it, calm, humble, and silent. But everything had changed. He was no longer invisible. The janitor with the mop had reminded everyone that greatness often wears ordinary clothes. And yet, beyond the skill and the surprise, there was a deeper lesson. Derek's arrogance wasn't just about fighting. It was about something many in that room had been guilty of, assuming someone's worth based on their job, their background, or the color of their skin. James's quiet victory was more than a sparring win. It was proof that respect cannot be demanded by titles or belts. It must be earned, and it must be given freely to all. As you hear this story, ask yourself, how many James figures have you overlooked in your own life? How many times have you dismissed someone before knowing their true story? Sometimes the strongest fighters are the quietest ones, and sometimes the people we look down on are the very ones who can teach us the greatest lessons. And if you've ever experienced or witnessed something like this, share your story in the comments. I might even make a video about it to raise awareness and justice. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so together we can spread the message further.